Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joanne Morrison. I'm on the steering committee of Livermore Indivisible, and we want to welcome you this afternoon to help us celebrate Pride. Our first guest is going to talk to us about pronouns and the choice thereof. We have Brittni Kiick. Prior to moving to Livermore in 2015, Brittni served 3 years in AmeriCorps. In 2011, as the AmeriCorps VIP Fellow for the Cal Poly LGBTQ Pride Center, she led educational programs, a peer counseling team, and created a volunteer program focused on developing opportunities for mentorship and community growth. From 2012 to 2014, Brittni served as an AmeriCorps Teaching Fellow for Citizen Schools in East Palo Alto. In addition to leading a classroom of 6th through 8th grade students, her primary role was to act as a liaison between local business professionals and the nonprofit. Brittni has a BS in psychology from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and most recently, you will know her as our Vice Mayor in Livermore. Thank you, Brittni.
You make me sound so fancy. Hi, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to be able to talk with you all. So generally, when I do presentations like this, it's a full, 2 to 3 hour ally training. We're just taking a tiny piece today, and we're going to talk about pronouns. Generally, I like to make it more conversational, less about me talking, but I do understand that we are being live streamed, so that maybe not everyone's comfortable answering questions that will be on camera, and that is totally fine. And I'm willing to chat with anybody privately, but I encourage you to speak up. A lot of the conversation is about the fact that no one is ever going to get it right 100% of the time, and that's okay. And that's how we all learn and grow as a community. Do you have my slides? So as we get started, I'm going to model for you how you might talk about pronouns. So I'm Brittni Kiick. I have been in Livermore for almost 8 years now because my daughter is almost 9. And I use she, her pronouns. And it's really just one sentence in my introduction. It's not the main part of my introduction. So you can choose to ask others, for example, as you're walking in on name tags, to add pronouns. You can give people opportunities on forms to add pronouns if they so choose. But I think it's really important that we provide an option, but not a requirement. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So Livermore Pride is an organization that's been around since 2019 that friends of mine founded. We became friends because I showed up to an ice cream shop, bribed my children, then brought them over to the coffee shop next door to meet with a bunch of strangers to start an organization. And one of the things I love about Livermore is that most of the connections that I've made have been these random strangers that cared about things that I cared about, and we've built community around that, just like this group right here. So we can move on. Next slide. So here are our group norms. We have one focus for the, how many minutes do I have, Kyoko? Oh, great. We have one focus for 45 minutes. And I want lots of questions. Please interrupt at any time. Raise your hand, shout it out. There's not that many of us. I can handle it. Vegas rule. What is said here, that doesn't really stay here because we're online, but generally it does. And what is learned here is what's most important to leave here. You can laugh. Sometimes it's awkward. That's okay. You're not going to get in trouble for laughing at me. Go ahead. I'm hilarious. You can step up and step back. I was the child who was told, you may not raise your hand until 3 others have. So I try to step back when I am in presentations. And if you're the person that never raises your hand, maybe try to step up, try to participate a little bit more. Also reserve the right to change your mind. We're here to learn and grow, not dig our heels in. And we can move on. So if you have any questions that you don't want to ask publicly, you can absolutely either grab something in the back and write it down and give it to me later, and I will get back to you. It is totally fine if you want to, a lot of you have my phone number, if you would like to text me something, and I will send it over and we'll go over it as a group, but you don't have to ask that now if you don't want to, and we'll move to the next. So we're just going to start off with this. When's the first time you can remember learning that some people are trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming? We're going to ask all 3 questions, think about it for a minute, and then have a conversation. Where did most of the influence in your initial impressions about gender come from? Did they come from your parents, from a faith community, from your schools, from television? How have those impressions and understanding changed or evolved throughout your life? So I'm going to let you sit on that for a second. And while you're thinking, I'm going to tell you what my impressions were. So when I was little, my mom grew up in a very not progressive household, but wanted to be different with us. And she didn't know how to do it right all the time, and that's okay. And she's still learning and growing now. She didn't have words for these things, but one of my brother's classmates, very good friends, we'd walk home together every day after school. He's a little bit younger than me, was assigned the gender as a little boy at birth, and every day came in dresses and bows and painted fingernails. And in 1997, didn't get a great reaction from a lot of parents and students. My mom went out of her way to make a relationship with that family and remind my brother and I that this is this child, this is how they would like to express themselves. There weren't really a conversation about pronouns. We still use he, him pronouns. I'm not sure how this child identifies now as a probably 30-year-old. But I remember it sticking out to me that my mom was treating these people differently than others were, as if they were just our neighbors, because they were just our neighbors, right? And that was when I was little. And I didn't meet someone who openly identified, had a name for being trans until I was in college. And so when I met people in the Pride Center at college and met someone who identified as genderqueer, did not identify as part of the binary at all, it kind of clicked like, oh, that kid that we went to elementary school with, maybe that's what was going on there, but I didn't have language. So from 7 to 19, I had no language for this concept. And the only conversations that I saw around being trans, words like transvestite, hermaphrodite were used. You think about Ace Ventura, that pet detective, there's this awful, just, it's a terrible way, a depiction of being trans, and the emotion of disgust that it is portrayed in that movie is basically what I saw in the media, but that kind of juxtaposed to what my parents showed me of how to behave, and it was confusing. And so in college, meeting someone and hearing their story was the first time that I was like, oh, this is a thing that like I don't get at all, and I need to learn about. And as someone who always likes to be the best at things, not knowing about something made me even more curious. Like, I want to know, I want to understand more. And so that was something that I focused on. And throughout my life, boy, have things changed from 1997 of not understanding why this quote unquote little boy was wearing dresses to now knowing tons of gender nonconforming and non-binary and trans people and being a part of Pride. And from, you know, I'm only 33, and so things have changed a lot. And so I know that just in my generation, how much perspectives has shifted. It reminds me that generations before me, the perspective, the shift and the conversation, they might have not known, you know, a J at 7. And so they might even not have had that initial exposure. And so it's a reminder that like every generation has a very different experience of how they talk about an experience and are shown gender in their life. So that's a little short about my learning and evolution. And I would love if anyone would like to share.
I'll go hammer on. So for me, the first question. First time you can remember, kind of like Brittni, a little older, but I lived in Dublin. Then middle school, we moved over here to Dublin. So we're talking middle of 7th grade. And I graduated from Dublin High in 1984. So there wasn't much talk about LGBTQ. There wasn't much representation in media. There was no like Will and Grace, none of that stuff. So I was deeply in the closet. I'm a gay man. And so I didn't see any trans people in the Tri-Valley in the 80s. Like, I kind of probably saw some stuff on TV, maybe, but like you said, like the Ace Ventura type thing, making fun of, derogatory. So like with Brittni, for me, when I went to San Francisco State eventually, like in mid 90s, early 90s, I graduated from SF State in 97 was my degree. Obviously, going to San Francisco in the 90s, that's where I fully came out. I joined the gay men's fraternity, went to the Castro. That's where I really started to see trans people. I didn't really have a lot of trans friends though, because I think the gay community is getting better, but even back then, and I think this is something as a gay person in the community we need to work on, which is why William wanted to be an ally for trans folks. I think we were the gay folks and the trans folk we kind of always thought were over there and we didn't really understand them, even within the gay community. So I didn't have a lot of trans friends because I hung out with the gay guys. It was like, but I would see them at pride events and thought they were cool. So that's where I started seeing people and being more aware of transgender, non-binary. First influences of gender, probably from, society and my mom a little bit, but society, like I said, there was not a lot of LGBTQ representation in this Tri-Valley in the 80s or around TV, and people in the 80s was if you were gay, you get AIDS and you would die. So that's changed now. I think male and female are totally much more open than when I was growing up. Definitely changed now, and especially now I'm an educator at East Avenue Middle School, and we have a student who biologically is female but prefers to use a male name and male pronouns. So it's really interesting. Me being part of the community, I'm always really aware of that, but some of my co-teachers, like you said, people make mistakes and they'll say she and they'll catch themselves, oh, I'm so sorry, I meant he, and I'm like, don't look at me like, I'm like, it's okay. I mean, me being part of the community, I'm really sensitive to it. They just have to get more used to it. And people are going to make mistakes, like you said. And it's going to happen, and don't beat yourself up over it. It's not the end of the world.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else to contribute? No. I'm going to try to turn the fan on because I'm sweating.
Yeah.
Hi, I am Mel. So my first exposure to seeing people that are different is from childhood in the Philippines. Ironically, mostly Catholic, population, but in the entertainment world, it's a big thing, from as early as I can remember. But again, like Brittni said, we didn't have language for that. So it was more entertainment rather than, an actual sensitive kind of recognition. So that's my earliest memory of that.
And how that changed?
It's still pervasive in the in the entertainment industry, but the whole LGBTQ community has evolved so much, and there's a lot more, sensitivity to it.
We'll move on then. So, like was said, a lot of things have changed. If you think about what's on Netflix right now compared to what was on ABC, CBS, the main cable channels that's all we had access to in the before times, there was not representation. you can find someone that looks like you and has an experience like you, or someone that looks nothing like you and has an experience that's nothing like yours in mainstream media in ways that we could not before. And there are problems with social media, absolutely. But what's really great about the access that social media provides us, it allows people to build community outside of their neighborhood. So you can create relationships, build relationships, have the opportunity to learn from people like you or unlike you from all parts of the world. And so I think generationally, we're seeing a big shift. And so before we move on, I'm going to talk about my kids a little bit. And the first time that they remember learning about someone, transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, it came directly from me as a parent. It came from books. There are so many fabulous books that we have access to here in our own library about gender, about being LGBTQ in general. And like what a very strange but proud moment as a parent were my children, you know, having bath time at little, we're talking 2 and 4, when they still bathed together. And Max was very into what boys can't and girls can't at that time. And Cora was like, nah. And so I'm, you know, sitting there scrolling Instagram while they're in the bath, sitting on the toilet, not, you know what I mean? It's closed. I'm watching them in the bath. And my daughter says, nah, girls can do whatever they want. And then Max says, well, you don't get to have a penis. And she says, you don't know. Any girl could have any genitals and any boy could have any genitals, and you don't know, and you have to ask them what their gender is. And I was like, you're 4. You're in the back. Like, okay, I mean, you're not wrong. And she's like, what? You know, and these are just normal conversations, not because we had like the talk about it, because it was an everyday, as you're getting dressed, Mom, why do I have a vulva? Well, because some people have vulvas and some people have penises. It wasn't like, because you're a girl. That was just language that we tried really hard to maintain, that your body parts are your body parts and your gender is your gender, and they don't have to be the same. When my cousin transitioned, there was no fear about discussing this with my kids. It was very much like, your cousin D is now your cousin V, and she uses she, her pronouns. My daughter was 6 at the time. My son was 4. And when we were about to go see them, I was like, remember, this is your cousin Violet now. That is the name. And then Cora was the one that was like, okay, Max, that's Violet, not D anymore. We're gonna move on. Like, and it was not a scary or big conversation. And that is a generational change. When I was a child, my uncle is gay, and my mom had a lot of pressure and fear instilled in her about keeping it a secret that my uncle was gay. And I was like, what? How am I gonna do that? We're around him and his partner all the time. What, that's his roommate forever? Like, let's get over it, right? So just 3 generations, we go from my mom deciding she is gonna actually tell her child that her uncle is gay, to my daughter being the one to explain transition of a teenager to a 4-year-old. So, you know, and we're at the point now where my kids are better at it than I am. They have a friend at school whose pronouns have changed maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 2 or 3 years. And every time we refer to that person, I will use, Sam, she, no, they. And I'm like, oh, okay, I did not know that. Thank you for the information. And then we move on a couple months later, and it's, well, you can say she or they. All right, and then we'll continue the conversation and move on. It's not weird to them. It's totally a part of their normal everyday life. And I think that I'm not worried about the kids. Kids are all right. I'm worried about us keeping up and keeping an open mind and being the people that they feel comfortable to come ask these questions to, so they don't feel the need to have to go to the internet to find answers. Because I don't want us, our generations, to get left out of the learning and growing that our kids are doing. No problem. And then we'll move on to the next slide. So this is our queer umbrella. And this is just a reminder that LGB, and there's so many more. There's so many more letters over here: lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, omnisex, all the things, they're over here. Those are who you're attracted to, who you want to have a relationship with, who you love. Still within the queer umbrella, other side, have nothing to do with your gender. Being trans is just not identifying your gender assigned at birth to the gender that you identify with. That's it. And so, as Ron mentioned, there is a long history of transphobia within the queer community. Still exists today. We have issues with it where, there are groups of gay men protesting drag shows because they don't think that that is an acceptable way to live. And it's something that is constantly a conversation and battle within queer activism, is making sure that just because things were going okay for gay white men and marriage equality happened, that we don't stop fighting for everybody else. And so we can move on to the next. And so now we'll talk about a little bit about what is gender. And so does anybody have an answer to the question? What is gender?
Gender, I explained it. So to me, gender is, and I'm not going to say the sex you're born biologically, because to me now it's the gender you identify with. It's not who you're attracted to, like Brittni is saying. Gender is just if you feel male, female, or if you feel neither, they or them, they might not feel either gender. But that's what I think gender is.
So gender is self-defined an identity. We can move to the next slide. And so this is the genderbread person. And I will say that there are lots of queer activist communities that don't like this representation at all. They feel it's too simplistic. And there have been trainings that I've been to that are like, no genderbread person. As someone who has done presentations with a lot of groups of older and highly religious people, I think sometimes it's okay to start with basics and acknowledge the fact that this is more complex than this. And that, yes, this isn't the full answer, but it's gonna get us started in a conversation. So I have to acknowledge that here. So this is our genderbread person, and here are little spots. And so we have identity, expression, sexual orientation, and biological sex. And so we're gonna see where all these things fit. So identity, your gender, how you identify, is only for you. Intrinsic feeling, it's completely individual, completely internal, may or may not be static, like I talked about with my child friend. She, they is fine, then it's only they, then it's only she. Not my decision to make, their decision to make, mine to respect. It does not need to match, and this reminds me, I need to fix this. Does not need to match sex assigned at birth, and we'll talk about why I need to add assigned at birth right here. And it does not need to match your expression. We can move on. So again, this is an old slide. I haven't updated it, but as we are learning, it's biological sex assigned at birth, because it turns out that biological sex isn't a thing. I have a friend from college who now their main field of research and their PhD is the fact that biological sex is far more complex than we ever thought. It is not just X and Y chromosomes. It is not levels of testosterone. It is not levels of hormones. it is not external presentation of genitalia. It is so complicated that argument of, well, it doesn't match your biological sex actually doesn't make any sense, because intersex is far more common than I think anybody understands. Intersex is something that is assigned at birth, similarly to your sex assigned at birth. So I have a baby pops out, doctor says, I see what I think is a vulva, therefore this is a girl. Doctor says, I see what I think is a penis, therefore this is a boy. Doctor sees something he doesn't recognize and he says, intersex. And we move on. It has nothing to do with the chromosomes, has nothing to do with hormone levels, it has nothing to do with the literal DNA in your body. It is a guess based on a doctor's assumption. And the most recent stat that I have is that an estimated 1.7% of the population was assigned intersex at birth, which is the same number of people in our population that have red hair. So if you know a redhead, you likely know an intersex person, and you probably don't know. I think I covered everything. Move on. Okay. An expression is your clothing, your hair, your voice, your walk. Nothing to do with anything on the right side. Can change daily, as you will meet later. My good friend Ava, depending on whether she is Ava or not. The expression changes daily. Environmentally, everyone has an expression of gender, and it does not necessarily conform to the girls section and the boys section at a big box store. We can go to the next. And then sexual orientation is completely unrelated to gender or biological sex. Again, only the person knows who you love and or are attracted to or are not attracted to. So that is our genderbread person. Again, it's not a perfect, metaphor, but I think it helps get the conversation started. So I'm going to pause. Are there any questions? I've been talking a lot that anyone would like to ask at this point. Yeah, biological sex, absolutely. And it's really interesting because a lot of women, a lot of birthing people, got it wrong just now, and I fixed myself. A lot of birthing people are discovering their intersex status when they try to have a child. And testing is done, and they're like, oh, I don't have all of the internal organs necessary to have a child like I thought I did. Or it turns out that I have, it's like XXO or XXY that makes it difficult to conceive. So as we progress as a society who has more science available to them, we're learning so much more about biological sex. Any other questions, comments, or we will move along. Does anybody online have any questions or comments? I cannot see what they are questioning and or commenting. Oh, you need to unmute, Stephanie.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to know, and maybe this is something that Dr. Gok could answer, I'm not sure, but when a child is born and it's not obvious what their genitalia is, are they still assigning a gender? In other words, I saw something about, well, the doctor wasn't sure, so they made him a boy, or the doctor wasn't sure, so they made him a girl. Where are we at with that? Do we do nothing and wait until it evolves?
So this is something that I haven't researched in a while. The last time that I had like actual data on this was quite a few years ago, but from 5+ years ago, this was a state by state decision. It was based on the hospital you were at, the state you were in. But what is interesting to me in the debate about gender affirming care in trans kids is there is this conversation that they're going to do genital surgery on minors. The genital surgery that's happening to minors are infants in a hospital when a doctor makes a decision for a parent and a child without their consent. That does unfortunately still happen. It happened a lot more a long time ago. Brittni Kiick was part of a documentary. It was called something that I don't remember. Gender something. Anyways, there is conversation about that. It has decreased. Parent choice became more part of the conversation. There is, but these surgeries that the fear mongering is talking about isn't happening in kids, and when it is, it's an infant, and it's not the choice of an infants can't make any choices of the infant or the parent. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's
Yes,
the
it
information I
does.
have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else online? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Dr. Doctor. So you gave an excellent answer there, Brittni. The problems that are found are various places in various states when that occurs, and it's looking like both the genders are available. At this present time, the usual course of action is to wait, not do things immediately in any way, shape, or form. You do a full gender evaluation with chromosomes, and then you go into whatever counseling type of period you would go into. It's far more dangerous to do any type of surgery with a very, very young child than it is with anyone of an older age. And actually, psychologically, for the family and the child, it can be devastating. The ages that things are really starting to be thought about, and this again depends on what literature you're reading, is somewhere between the ages of like 5 and 8 years old, because that's when many changes happen because of schools, etc. But that should be with a complete evaluation, not just parents and a doctor deciding, because that is a lifelong decision that has to be made. And psychologically, your hormones are different, even if your sexual organs look the opposite of what your hormones are. And those can't be determined that early either. That's where I'm going to stop. And if you have any more questions, I could answer those, I hope, adequately for you. This has been great so far. It's really excellent. Sorry I couldn't be there.
Thank you so much for being the real expert in the room, as I am just spouting off things I remember from college. Anybody else online have any questions? Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on. All right, so here we're going to talk about scenarios. We're going to talk about getting it wrong, which I do all the time. I've done multiple times in this presentation. No one has booed me or thrown tomatoes yet, so I think I'm okay. And when we're talking about learning examples, it's like, what do you do before, during, after, or follow up? There is a lot of conversation about people getting it wrong. There's a lot of conversations right now about companies getting it wrong in their supportive pride. And what I think are the most important pieces of the cycle is the during and follow up. Well, the after and follow up. So during is when you screw up. It's what you do after and as you move forward that I think shows the level of allyship and willingness to grow. I think it's important that we remember that we're never, ever going to get everything right, and that inviting people in to make a mistake and then try again next time is how we're going to grow continually as a society and across generation. So I'm going to tell a story about what was at the time what I thought the worst day of my life, when I had a friend who was identified as genderqueer. I knew this person was genderqueer, the first openly trans person I'd ever met. We had to do a presentation about who we are and how we got here and how we've grown over time during my AmeriCorps term. And in that presentation, we had to identify key individuals of who helped us grow throughout this time period. I identified Jess, again, I'm making all these names up. I identified Jess as a key person in my growth as a human, in my trajectory, as the first trans person I'd ever met. And we moved on and I did my presentation. I was like, oh, such a good presentation. And I was pulled aside by Jess and was like, I have not come out to any of these people in this room. You just outed me to a room of 100 people. Their presentation was later in the day. They were going to be able to identify themselves. What I thought was like, well, of course everybody knows. Why would they tell me and not everybody else? Everybody should know. It is not my place to out somebody. It is not my place to use somebody else's story as a reason why I'm so great in a presentation about myself. I then bawled for like an hour, and it was then my mentor who was like, hey, so like you messed up. We let you know you messed up, and then you made it all about you, and you cried for an hour in the corner. And I was like, she was like, you know, so get over yourself. So it's people like her, my mentor at the time, who are able to say, it's not about you, let's let it go, highly emotional 19-year-old, and move on, that have helped me throughout my life. One of my closest friends identifies as they, them, talk to them on the regular, talk to their partner on the regular, constantly use she, her pronouns on accident, not because I don't know the correct pronoun, but because I mess up, because I'm human. And here is how that conversation might go. So Ron, I was telling you, I had such a great time with her, such a time with them the other day, and they were telling me all about this situation, and it was really fun. And then she was like, and I kept saying she, and I kept saying she, right? What could Ron do in that situation to correct me in a way that I should respond properly and not go cry in the corner for an hour? What do you think? So I'm gonna just keep talking to you, Ron. And then she was like, oh my gosh, it was the best pizza I'd ever had. And then she asked for extra cheese, and she got extra cheese. What do you think about that awesome pizza restaurant, Ron?
I think they thought it was probably great.
That's exactly right. Nothing. You use the correct pronoun because you know the pronoun. I immediately get the like, I know that reminder. And then as we continue the conversation about the extra cheesy pizza, I continue to use they, them pronouns, and we move on. Now, here is how a person who is making them about them might react. So Ron, say again, I think they had it right.
They probably.
I know it's they. I am not homophobic. I am not transphobic. I know it's they, them. I didn't mean it. Like, don't tell them. I swear I'm a good person. Please don't post this on Instagram. The number of times that happens is more often than you would think. It's okay. Move on. Talk about, what is the conversation about? Is the conversation about gender? Is the conversation about being trans? Is the conversation about being a good ally? Maybe at that time you might want to have a deeper conversation you're talking about pizza, keep a conversation about pizza and let's move on. Similarly, I think it's important to talk about how we talk to kids. And again, this is a charged topic. Maybe in 20 years, my kids will tell me that I did it all wrong. They probably will, because that's what kids do. I tell my mom she did it all wrong all the time. The reality is that I want them to be able to come to me and ask the question, but sometimes they don't need me or they know better. So again, a friend, pronouns, change back and forth in the car. How was Sam's day? Did they have a good time? Whatever. My child doesn't correct me. My child does what Ron did and said, she had a great time. I turned to my child and I'm like, their pronouns are they, them. We need to respect their pronouns. My child says, actually, she prefers she right now. And I just didn't want to make you feel bad. So these situations can happen, okay, with the sassy 7-year-old. And so I think, again, it's not turning and immediately making it a lecture, which I did and mistakenly should not have, but maybe a question of, oh, they or she, and letting my child correct me because they know, because they spend the most time with this child and I do not. Again, it's what you do during, the after and the follow-up. The during, the screw-ups are gonna happen all the time, but how do you respond? The before is practice. If you've never used the pronouns they, them in conversation, it is going to be difficult if the first time you use those pronouns is with that person. So have a conversation with your spouse. Have a conversation with a friend of, I'm going to hang out with them later today, and they, and they, and they, and they, and we move on. I also want to address that we've only talked about he, she, and they today because those are very common, but there are so many other pronouns. Sie, zir. They are more difficult to remember if they're not part of your lexicon. So if you're interacting with someone with those, use them. I also have a friend named Den. Den does not use pronouns. Den only speaks about Den using the name Den. That's it. There are no pronouns. When they go to a conference or work or something, and they are told they are required to add their pronouns to their name tag, they don't, they just add their name. And I think as we're moving forward as a society, we have conversations about make sure you ask for people's pronouns. But I think it's important, and this is a conversation I had with a teacher recently of, hey, I'm asking kids for their pronouns, and some kids are telling me, I don't use pronouns, you use my name. And what do I do with that? And I think it's provide the opportunity to share information. You cannot require anybody to share information, especially not a 13-year-old. They will not if they don't want to. So provide the space that is open for them, provide the opportunity to change. So what's sometimes difficult is when you are adding documentation at your school or with your medical records, it's all going into some giant CRM system and they might only have a drop-down option. It's going to be difficult for someone to then do a bunch of paperwork to change how they identify. And that is something that I think, if you are in an IT position or a position of operations, that you can ask, like, does it need to be dropped down? Is gender something we actually need as a data set in how we make decisions in our organization? Do we identify the type of care, the type of access, whatever it is we're doing by their gender? If we don't, then it doesn't need to be a drop down. It can be a blank line, a fill in the blank for someone to identify how they choose to identify. If it's just he, she, they, you are limiting that. I understand. I understand that data analysis sometimes needs a drop down. You sometimes need that for whatever analytics that you're doing. If it matters for the care you are providing, or for the service you're providing, or the product you're providing, maybe make it a drop down with a caveat that we know this is not expansive, but based on, and sometimes it's state regulation, sometimes it's whatever, we need to make a choice. But if you don't need that information, like, why? Don't make people choose. All right. I've been chatting at you for a long time. Questions, any scenarios anybody else would like to share or walk through so we all feel like normal for messing up? Yeah.
I have a question on role reversal. So if we were talking about Sam, for instance, and you are talking about Sam in the correct pronoun, they, them, and I insist because I'm so old school and I insist, no, she is, until maybe to a point I'm belligerent to using, I insist it's she because I know her as a she. So how would you handle that?
So I think this is a situational in where we're talking, where are you? Are you at the grocery store? Are you in a public place? Are you alone in this person's home? Because there are opportunities to be an upstander where, are you interrupting the situation to make that person kind of shut it and move on? Are you going to support the individual? So let's say I'm standing here. This is Sam right here. And you're constantly saying she, and I know it's they. I might ignore you completely and only talk to Sam. Hey, Sam, this is kind of fucked up. I'm really sorry. Why don't we go over here, acknowledge that this is difficult for them, this might be painful for them, ask them privately, not in front of you, would you like me to intervene? Sometimes making a big deal out of it makes their day worse. They are now the center of attention when they didn't want to be. So if you are alone in your home, maybe it's your mother and you're like, Mom, I get it. You were brought up in a different time, but it is really important to me that I respect Sam and that I respect the people I care about. And I respect you as my mother. And because I respect you, I want to help you learn. You might be in an argument, but it is about respecting that other person. It is not about giving in to that situation. There's also just I'm belligerently saying she, and we're just avoiding. I'm just finding another topic of conversation. I'm finding something else to have a conversation about or distract so that Sam is not uncomfortable and that the crowded room we're in does not become focused on us. And so it's who's around. What's the goal? Is the goal to support the person next to you? Is the goal to help the person in front of you learn and grow? Is the goal to avoid a scene? And those are things to think about of how you, there is no one answer. So I hope that was helpful. And if anybody else has thoughts on how they would handle it. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Becca, go ahead. Please unmute. You can't, I'm looking at you, but really I'm over here. Yes, Becca, please unmute.
Hello, this is Becca. I use she, her pronouns. I loved everything that you just shared. I think that it's really important to keep in mind that people don't always want like an intervention. Like you said, it makes a really big deal out of something that maybe they didn't want. And something that I try to practice is with my non-binary friends and coworkers and things like that. I ask them, like these situations are likely to arise. Like how would you like me to address them when they do? And that's been really helpful. And just knowing in advance, which, every situation is different, but I think that that is a really strong way to show allyship to the people that you love. And then I also just wanted to add too, like, I have a lot of friends who see themselves as allies to the LGBTQ plus community, and they butcher the pronouns sometimes. And, you know, I try my best to facilitate like that learning curve, and it can be really difficult. People do take it really personally and they make it all about them. And so I also wanted to say, like, thank you for sharing that bit about saying, like, I respect you and I'm doing this because I want to help you learn, because I think that sets like a good like baseline going into that conversation to like correct somebody's behavior, I guess.
Thank you for sharing, Becca. I will say that, you know, as you were talking, you reminded me of another scenario where I messed up. And I think it's really important when I do these presentations to talk about all the times that I failed, because I think it normalizes that failure and growth is okay. This has been like something that I've focused a significant amount of my time on for, I don't know, how old am I? For like 10, 15 years. And I still get it wrong a lot. I am not gender nonconforming. I am not non-binary. I have no understanding of what that feels like. And so all of my information is only coming from outside of me. When I'm talking about sexual orientation and other LGB plus identities, I have a lot easier time using my own personal experience as a bisexual woman to understand that internal conflict, that internal feeling. I don't get it. And I know that I don't get it. And I know that I'm not the one to really actually be leading this right now. But this is who was available to show up today. And I think it's important to recognize that too, right? So something, again, screwed up the other day. I asked for all of these single stall bathrooms in a building to be genderless, just restroom. And then my trans friend who uses that building, we did change it, it was great. I was like, did you notice the bathrooms? They were like, no. It's like, did you notice the bathrooms? No. Why? What happened? I got them to change it. It's all genderless now. And they're like, okay. Like, what? Why is that? And I was like, well, and in my head, I'm thinking, because you should thank me, because I helped make it welcoming to all non-binary people. That's not important. They didn't give a crap about the bathrooms. They were like, well, congratulations. Like, it was a very awkward conversation. And then it was like, this isn't about me. Like, bathrooms are a big deal to a lot of people, and some people do not care at all. I am one of those people who, if the line is long in the ladies' room, as a fully cisgender female, I will go in the men's room because the line is shorter. This person is also that person before they use they, them pronouns. They don't care about the bathrooms. For some people, it's a big deal. In my head, I decided, well, therefore, they're non-binary. They must care a lot. I'm going to point out how great I am and how I got this changed. And then they very politely reminded me that it's not about me and I don't care. And can we go back to talking about the donuts? I don't care about the bathroom. And so again, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to mess up. You're going to do things. Do I think that getting the bathrooms changed was a worthwhile piece of my time? Absolutely. Do I think it was something that I needed to bring up to other people to remind them about, like, what a great ally I am? No. But I think that talking out loud about these missteps and reflections is the only way that we're going to normalize growth and not being perfect and not being afraid of getting canceled. Because I think that's a legitimate fear that people have about getting it wrong. So I'm not going to bother trying. Right.
So we just received the text from Eva. She is stuck in the traffic. So you have another half hour.
What? What are you gonna do with me? Oh no. 30 more minutes? All right. Well, I've got nothing very specific for you. Absolutely, please do give me something to say. Talk about.
What I find myself doing, if I'm not sure about someone's pronouns and I don't feel like it's a good situation to ask, I'll just say they. Is that, instead of he or she, is that a good way to approach it, or is that not?
I do that. I don't know if it's a
You
good
did.
way.
I noticed you did just in the discussion. I kept
Yeah.
noticing they, you do use they.
I
them,
do it
and-
a lot, and I don't know that it is necessarily the right way. It is a way that I practice my they them language. I don't know. And the spaces and circles you are in really matter. So what is quote unquote normal and okay in Livermore is going to be different than what is quote unquote normal and okay in Texas versus San Francisco versus a middle school classroom versus your congregation. And so an example about how I have no answer to your question is that when I was at Cal Poly, there was a new generation of students who had come in who wanted to use the word queer to describe the LGBTQ community. There was a group of students who had come to California for college, who were from the South, and were like, absolutely not. If I am a part of this organization, we will not be putting queer on any of our posters because that is a term that was used against me all through high school. It is derogatory. And then there was another group of students who was from the Bay Area. We're like, what are we talking about? We use queer all the time. It's more inclusive. Then we don't have to say all the letters. We don't have to do. And these are two groups of passionate people wanting to make a difference who have a different relationship with that word and language and had a conflict. And it was one of those situations where at the beginning of trainings, depending on who was doing the training with me, we decide, are we going to use the word queer today? Are you comfortable with that word? Because if the person that was doing an allied training alongside me had that word used against them as a slur for 5 years, we're going to not do that slide. If the other person was like, yeah, that was used as a slur and I'm reclaiming that word and that's important as my part of my story to share, sure. So again, I have no answer to your question.
No, that was an answer. That was an answer. Situational, just know your audience and be respectful.
Yeah, and so if
guess.
you're using they, and then someone comes to you and is like, why are you keep using they? My pronouns are she, her. Why do you need to like make a big thing? Read the room. It's harder. These trainings are difficult because the majority of the time, the answer is don't know. Read the room, try your best, and be okay at failing. I think the training should be called Be Okay at Failing. And that's that. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? You can ask me anything. And if I don't want to answer, I just won't.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you had mentioned about surgeries, to conform to what you think you are. That's, not done early but what about medical intervention? What the timing around, hormonal changes, et cetera, the pharmaceutical type things? At what point is it advisable? Is there a sort of a guideline that doctors use, that parents, that children? How is that handled now?
So I'll address it purely from experience, and then I would love if the doctor could chime in. Yeah, so just from personal experience, knowing people that had puberty blockers, I don't know what's happening on the medical side, but the mental health side of that child making it from 12 to 18 is why I am personally a strong advocate for gender affirming care. Because if we can decrease the body dysmorphia and shame that going through puberty might bring, the mental health side, I think, is worth it, because LGBTQ people, especially trans youth, are at the highest risk for suicide of any teen population, which are already at a high risk of suicide because they're teenagers and because hormones and all the things. But Bruce.
I totally agree with what you just said. The problems you have are so many people have different ideas as to what is right. There is no true right or wrong, but the best time to hit is before you actually have gone through puberty, if there haven't been any decisions made. I probably will get into trouble for this. It's probably the easiest time to do a change in gender, as far as a physical change would be. You do have obviously a difference in size growth of things. It's also a best time to think about hormones and how you get used to them, because no matter what you say your gender is, or no matter what your gender is, however you want to say this, when the hormones stop, it's horrible. When they start, it's horrible. And the definite ups and downs are increased dramatically the longer you wait to have a transmission in what gender you want to have the changes made for. So you have a spread at a lower dose as necessary at a younger age and going up towards a more adult age, which is done. You don't just go a full-fledged 22-year-old adult hormonal change. When we used to do gender changes, it's much easier on the individual. It also is mentally easier, because when you start changing on your hormones, your brain changes, as we all know, and how you think, and you need to figure out exactly who you are, what you are, and you have some time to do that. Our biggest problem, and this is a bad word, but I'll use it, is not only do we have a form of bigotry for certain types of people from certain countries, we have bigotries for everything. And it's based on what we don't feel we are versus what the other person is. So yeah, I totally agree with it. It's to be started at the teen time, if it's going to be started, maybe a little earlier, but it really depends on the support. And parents have a difficult time all on their own, even if they know that their child isn't what the gender is that they were born as, making that relationship work for them. It's a learning situation through all of this. One of the things they don't really have is a very good program for parents to be able to work with this feeling, as well as the programs to work with children and teens now. That's always been, you got to make the decision, it's your child, and you have to act that way. And when you get negative feelings from the parents, that's even worse for the child. And it isn't the kid's fault. That's the whole thing too. That's one of the problems that even the adults and grandparents, parents, etc., this is what they feel like. This is what they want to be. And you love this child, you love this person, then that's something that you have to help them feel that they're doing something that's correct for them, even if it's really, really difficult for you. They don't have a lot of psychiatrists, psychologists who deal with this either. And that's another problem. And many of the times, if you can't have mental health issues taken care of early, they develop into really some horrible things as people get older. That's one of the big things that's happening with crime right now, is they're saying mental health problems have not been adopted appropriately at younger ages, and therefore they developed into terrible outcomes for, well, not only the person, but for the other people who've been involved with that person. That's where I am for that one. But I do agree with you on that as far as starting at the teen or just before the teenagers. And that's quite a few of the patients I had, I would follow that. And I didn't make any judgments at all. This is what you're feeling is okay. This is what you want to be. But if you need some more help, let's find it for you. Let's not just have you sit there or stand there or whatever and try to fix it yourself, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, so I will also speak to the fact that you can't just like call Walgreens and get a puberty blocker. It's an extremely long process. As someone who is cisgender and just wants to get therapy from Kaiser, that took a long time to just get a regular weekly therapist. As someone who's dealing with a child who was recently diagnosed with anxiety, as a parent, resources for myself to walk through that with my child, gender has nothing to do with it at this point. And those resources are limited and scarce. So this is my opinion. I strongly feel that this is a moral panic. This is not a real thing. The number of times the New York Times has had a front page article about the rise in trans teens and all of these surgeries, there is no data to back that up. I think that as allies and advocates, we need to ask for a source. We need to read more than the headline. We need to pay the $1, whatever they want you to pay, to get the full article and not the top blurb. I listened to a great podcast that really just did a deep dive into these New York Times articles about the fact that there are no sources to back. This is all an opinion piece. There are no sources to back any of this up. And so we are seeing all of the hallmarks of a moral panic is being followed here, as it does for many others that have happened throughout time. And so, being careful about what research and what articles and what we continue to share and put out in the world, I think is something we should also think about, because it's difficult. It's difficult to find an actual expert, even if you have insurance, which we know many people don't. And so we oftentimes then turn to Dr. Google, and sometimes Dr. Google doesn't have the best information, and that as advocates, we can do our job in not sharing misinformation about what is not actually, I think, that big of a deal. Anybody else have any other thoughts, questions? Yes.
So I just wanted to tell everybody that Bruce is a retired pediatrician, and Becca is actually a Planned Parenthood organizer. So I was wondering, Becca, if you have any idea how the treatment is going on with the PPMM?
Yeah, sorry, I have a bit of a cough right now. So I don't know the intricacies of like how those services are provided to our patient base, as I'm on the organizing side of things. I'm not in the health center, but we do provide gender affirming care in various forms through through hormone therapy, counseling, and things like that. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And closest from here is Hayward or Tracy, right?
Yeah, so I'm with Planned Parenthood Marmonte. So in Alameda County, we have the Hayward location, which is on A Street in downtown Hayward, and then we have Oakland. But I think that there is a closer health center through Planned Parenthood NorCal. And Kyoko, you've mentioned before that that one is actually closer than the locations that we have.
Yeah, that is San Ramon.
Oh, San Ramon, yeah. So I'm not sure if San Ramon provides gender affirming care, but I can definitely look into that right now, actually.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just one thing. Today, as a matter of fact, it's kind of viral on Twitter. There's a establishment in Clovis that put out a tweet about supporting Pride Month, and they support LGBT community, but not the T community. Yeah, and it said transgender and transvestites are not welcome because keep your hands off our children. So where do you think, I mean, you see this all the time, where did this all come from that there's this association with pedophilia with the trans community? I don't get it, you know, and that's what you hear the most is that it's really that it's the trans community after all these children, you know, and it's just so odd to me that I don't know.
Do I have thoughts? Oh, yes, I do.
Yes.
Are we online? Oh, yes, we are. So I'm going to be on my best behavior. So when there is an issue, let's just use a different example, okay? You have your own problems. Maybe you spend a lot of time gossiping about your neighbor. I think there is a lot, we know for a fact, we have data to back it, we have lawsuits that prove it, of the number of accounts of sexual abuse and pedophilia within the Catholic Church. Is that on the front page of the New York Times? Is there a financial benefit to an organization to point the finger elsewhere? That is the nicest way that I can answer your question. We have data to back up that there are serious issues. Child marriage is legal in multiple states. How old is it here? No, in California? Jesus. Okay, child marriage apparently is legal in California. And I was like, we're in California, we're fine. Parent consent for child marriage apparently is legal. And is that on, clearly it's not on the front page news because I did not know that. And here I am pointing the finger at other states. Yeah, so I have no data, cannot find any data on the prevalence of abuse in trans communities towards others. There is extreme amounts of abuse, sexual, and violent abuse from others to the trans community. Real data, real numbers, real stories. Has there ever been a trans person who has done something awful to another person? Absolutely, of course, because there is somebody of any identity who has done crappy things to other people. But the numbers do not match the hysteria. And I don't know how we fight the narrative. We have a lot of work to do. For example, we have lots of conversation about empty allyship, changing your logo color, selling t-shirts, capitalism, being corporations taking over pride. It's not going to solve the problem of these stories or anything else. But what I do feel very strongly about is that the more we talk about it, whether that conversation starts because Apple changed their logo to a rainbow or because somebody is selling rainbow t-shirts, the more we talk about all of it openly and have discussions like this, have the opportunity to have a forum, have books, have TV shows, the easier it's going to be, I think, to have generational change to where I might never change everybody that's over 65. I might never change all of their minds, but we might be able to do a better job of having at least open conversation with younger generations to maybe stop that. Yes, please.
And I wanted to ask.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I have a comment. First of all, I really appreciate the analogy to get the point across regarding the New York Times using the Catholic Church, scenario. I am Catholic, and I had a step trans daughter, and I have a step trans granddaughter. And right here in Livermore, St. Charles Borromeo has a very progressive priest. We have an LGBTQ ministry that is trying to change the minds of the older generation, particularly in our church even. But I just wanted to comment that I've lived it. The prejudice is alive and well, but on the flip side, Mel and I, Mel started the LGBTQIA plus ministry at St. Charles. And like yesterday, we had a picnic. We had about 26 people there that were allies and trans kids. So I think we're on the right track. I think it's just going to be baby steps. So, and my trans granddaughter lives in Idaho. And if you want to talk about being treated extremely poorly, we here in California get an A+.
Yeah, and I will note that we have more than one Catholic organization in Livermore, and one is trying really hard. St. Charles, Borromeo, is extremely progressive for a Catholic church. The other Catholic church was just in trouble for tweeting that maybe if you didn't want a hard life, you wouldn't be gay.
Right.
So it is the small incremental changes that will create safe spaces in your own communities. I don't know that that the Pope is going to be like, we're going to be just like St. Charles Borromeo. Probably not. It would be great. I don't know. Mel, you're pretty cool, but I don't know if you're that popular. But those incremental changes in those small communities are important, and it is important to call them out in situations so that they don't just hear that one group is the problem and the other is not. So thank you for calling that out and reminding me. Yes.
And I was going to say, Mike and I are members. We're going there later today they're doing a thing about Selma, the movie. Yeah, Asbury. Sorry, geez, we got married there, and we're Methodist. I used to be Catholic. Mike was Methodist, and I kind of got turned off by the Catholic Church because of their stance on me, being gay, and I was an altar boy and did the whole thing. But I was like, okay, but even our church, there's been a split in the Methodists between those churches that want to be called accepted reconciling churches and those who don't. And we're
Right.
one of the groups that want to be reconciling and accepting, and certain other Methodist churches aren't. So the other thing about allyship, I think just being there when you hear about an event is really important. That's a great way just to show your allyship. And the other thing I wanted to say that really kind of gets in my craw recently, if you want to call it that, being an educator, is that, and I've had people talk with it, you hear all these people, again, they're on the other side, misinformation, that supposedly we're trying to indoctrinate all these kids to turn them gay. It's like, I'm a gay man, I wear this at work. My students know I'm married to a man, Mike. I've mentioned him, we talk about him, but it's just like, oh, this other parrot talks about what he did on the weekend with his wife, and I talk about what I did on the weekend with my husband. I'm not trying to turn any kid gay. And I always would say, if I had the power to turn these kids gay, don't you think we'd have the power for them to do their homework? Wouldn't that be more important? It's like this whole indoctrination thing. We're not doing it. So when you hear people say that, fight back. It's like, no, your teachers are not trying to turn your kids gay. That's just wrong. But I figured out, I think, yeah, I mean, great, but I figured out what I think they mean is just basically indoctrinations mean letting your kids know that gay people exist. Yeah. I just heard in the news just really quick that one place in someplace pulled a history book, and here's the only reason why they pulled a history book, because it talked about Harvey Milk. They had a problem with the history book because it let people know that gay people exist, and this man died and was murdered fighting for gay rights, and certain parents didn't like that, so they pulled the book. So to them, indoctrination is letting us exist. And I'm sorry, but I've told those people, I'm not going to go in the closet. I'm not going to hide. If you don't want your kids to know gay people exist, then you need to, I don't know what you're going to do, because we're not going anywhere,
I'll add to this. P.S. You were going to say this, Ron, but I'm going to say it. Everybody, we invite you all, and everybody on the screen up there at home, we invite you to come to the Livermore Joint Unified School District Board meeting on the 13th of June. This is a follow-up. There are going to be these nutcases that are going to shout and scream, you guys are going to go to hell. Well, let's see who gets there first. But anyway, we appreciate asking this further. I'm going to bring my giant rainbow flag. I'm going to be wearing my rainbow shirt. And they say, who's the PFLAG lady? She's going to be there. This is the past couple. This will be my third meeting in a row. They meet every other Tuesday. It's at 7 p.m. They're near the intersection of Murrieta and Jack London. No. Yeah, that's right. And fortunately, we just live around the corner from there. So I put a plug in for that, and everything we're saying there is going to be the hot topic. These people won't go away, and we want to show them we're not giving down. We're not giving. Yeah. They started it, and we'll finish it.
So our most very special guest is here. Yay! And before we end the discussion of pronouns, I wanted to ask Ava specifically. So Ava, right now, you are, can you come so the camera can see you? Because right here. This is Ava. I'm sure there's going to be a better introduction, but here's Ava. Ava is currently expressing gender in a very femme way. Ava, when you're in costume, what pronouns would you prefer that I use?
So I usually in drag go by she, her.
And then when you're out of drag, what pronouns are you okay with people using?
I try to since I do so much drag, I try to create a little bit of balance. So I usually prefer to go by he, him out of drag. But I mean, it's when you do so much of it, and most people do know me as Ava, there's a lot of people that refer to me as Ava and she, her. So I'm not really bothered by it at all. Like there's no wrong answer for that one really, but.
And so because I know I referred to you as Ava out of drag and she, her out of drag, as you let me know that that is okay with you,
Yes.
do you identify as trans?
I do not.
So pronouns do not automatically mean that you are a transhuman? What? Like, so again, we had a lot of great conversations about pronouns, and we're so glad Ava's here now. And now I don't have to talk to you anymore. I love talking to you, but I feel like I've been on stage for a long time. Okay, here we go.
All right, switching microphones. Thank you, Brittni. That was really, really informative and helpful, and we love you. Thank you for coming. Yeah. And now I get to introduce Ava Lashay, who is a Bay Area-based drag entertainer and event MC. So for your next party, right? Often referred to as the Queen of the East Bay, Ava has spent the past 8 years building a name for herself in the community through hosting, producing, and performing in countless shows and events. I met her at the Drag Queen Story Hour. It was really fun. She loves to bring laughter and joy to people through the art of drag, but also uses her art form to raise awareness of everyday issues in the LGBTQIA+ community faces. Thank you. Ava?
Hi. How's everybody doing? And I'll make sure the camera.
Hi.
All right. Just want to ask questions or anything of the sort? I mean, I don't really know kind of, where do you want me to jump in?
But please do share what you told me about how did you become.
How I started drag. So I was a student at Las Positas College, and I became the president of the QSA on campus, the Queer Straight Alliance, and not intentionally. I was voted in without knowing, and we'd had a couple of past presidents, some of who are just amazing people who I still am in contact with, Sierra Green, Nico Portugal, and we were doing where we're required to have a club, like we would have the club days, and each club was required to have a big event each semester to keep like the club funding and everything. And Nico Portugal was one of the past presidents and came to and attended one of the meetings. And Nico had the idea of us doing a drag show as our first big event. And I was very I always knew I was gay. It was never a secret for me or anything, but it was one of those points in my life of me getting more comfortable being myself out and about. And like, luckily having that QSA at Las Positas College and being there in a really open campus gave me the ability to be more comfortable and like learn more of who I am and expressing that. And so when they said he wanted to do a drag show, we were like, sure. And somebody had the great idea of like, oh, we'll dress them up for it. And I was like, okay. And I didn't want to embarrass myself or offend anyone because I did not know a whole lot about drag outside of what most people know of drag, Mrs. Doubtfire, Mulan, any Eddie Murphy movie. And and so I was like, okay, well, I'll go and I'll do my homework. And a friend of mine was working at a drag show at the Stud in San Francisco. And I went, and it was a Susie and the Banshees tribute night. And I fell in love with it. I really thought it was a beautiful art form, and people were just having fun and being themselves, but being more than themselves. They were being, what they knew they could be without the limits of gender or anything. Because really in drag, you can be anything. And the really cool part about drag is that anybody can do it. It's not the archaic idea of men impersonating women. It really is everybody can do drag. And I really loved that. And so somewhere along the lines, I just kept going to the shows. And one day I decided I'd give it a try and go out. And it was just probably the most accepted I'd ever felt in any community. And I thought that was a really beautiful experience, and I wanted to be that for other people. So I decided to keep doing drag. And it just kept going. And so it was an accident I fell into, but it was a good accident, and I kept going, and I've met such incredible people. I've been able to be involved in incredible things like Livermore Pride, being invited to this today, and the shows, and really like new experiences. I hosted the first ever drag shows in Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton, California. And having grown up here in the Tri-Valley, I understood how big that was. And I just did a show actually at Charming Fig, and there was a woman who came up to us afterwards, and she's like, it's really cool that, you guys were able to really start doing stuff out here, because she told me she used to own a venue, and she'd hired the first ever Black entertainer to come out in Livermore, and just how like much backlash they got for it, but how it sold out and people loved it, and it was amazing. And it's crazy how people don't realize how far we've come in a very short, very, very short period of time, and that there's still so many issues and everything. And with drag, it's great because I have this platform where oftentimes when I am hosting, it's playful. It's this great like volley of like comedy that you got going on with an audience, but they get comfortable with you and they're having a good time. And it's not ripping the rug out from underneath them, but you get to have serious conversations with them too, because it's not that they're oblivious to the reality of the world. They're coming to those shows to escape a bit of that reality for a little bit and have a good time. But it's also, it's that reality check of like, I've been saying this a lot lately, especially after the story hour at Las Positas College. We're very, very privileged to be in the Bay Area, to be where we are. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and that's why it's great that there's so many people like yourselves who are a part of that. But there is so much work, but we are very privileged, because in other places, they're getting hit with drag bans. It's really amazing. Tennessee, they just overturned that drag ban today or yesterday. They overturned it yesterday. And a little bit of what I caught when we came in, you were talking about like them trying to like banning books. They just banned the Bible at a somewhere. I forget where I just saw it this morning, and they just in Utah. And a friend of mine posted that, and they're like, "It is a slippery slope when you start doing it." I was like, "This is the best thing ever." I was like, but it's true, because it's one of those things. And I think, we have, especially through the shows, through Livermore Pride and all the work that they've been doing. I recently became a part of the board, but all the work they've been doing for years, and Brittni's here, and just, it's, you see so much progress, but events like the Story Hour and where we met and everything was a great reminder, again, of how much work still needs to be done. And it really is, it is funny when you have that experience of, you have people who are arguing that they're defending their rights to not wear masks, to not whatever, while they're trying to literally strip away the rights of human beings. It's really, really crazy. And again, I never thought of myself as an activist, or really thought that was going to be a part of me in drag. Because I literally was like, I just want to be able to make people laugh and everything. But I learned over the years, it's really irresponsible for me to not use my voice when I do have a microphone in my hand and I am at the stage. So if any of you have been to the shows before, I do take time to talk about, what's going on in the world. And truly, when I say I appreciate people coming out to shows, I mean, we just came from a show. That's why I look so rough now. And telling people how much we appreciate them, especially now more than ever, because it's, again, this isn't a new fight for our rights by any means, but it does in different ways get harder each day with the pushback. And when you do see something on the news that says drag ban, and that's to target the trans community, was the wording for it was any adult cabaret style performance of dressing as the opposite gender. But it's like, That's not for a trans individual, that's not them playing dress up. That is their identity. And so that's a way that they were trying to target them. And so I hope that the one that just got passed in Texas also gets overturned like Tennessee. And again, it's been really great to seeing the amount of support on a bigger level, like celebrities that have gotten more involved too. I think Charlize Theron just said she was gonna fight a news reporter. That wasn't the exact words that were said, but I'm forgetting the name of the person. Actually, it's the woman she played in that movie. No. That was a great one. That was great. She was a monster, but no, she played, they did a movie, her, Margot Robbie, they did a film where they were playing, and it was the situation of like the news, like it was like, what is it? Not the Today Show, but like they worked news. Bombshell. That's the one. And actually the actress she played, or the character the woman she portrayed in the film is very apparently is very anti-gay. And so when Charlize Theron was making statements about supporting like drag queens and everything with the anti-drag bill, they actually got into a fight, which I just thought was kind of comical because she played that woman in the film. But no, I mean, it's like the Black Lives Matter movement. It's sad to see what gets us to the point, but it's beautiful to see all the support that comes out of it. And you realize how truly united we are with people. Even when I look back at the election of the Cheeto, I don't know if that's the right, I'm a drag queen, I'm usually joking. When I say these things, I'm like, that doesn't sound very professional, but during that election, it was a terrifying experience. It was really rough seeing the results of that election. But what I took away from it was looking at that beautiful blue strip from Arizona on up to Washington and being like, I'm in the right place. Like, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I just ramble. If anybody has anything like big questions or anything, by all means.
Yeah, I think what you do is great. And the whole idea about banning the drag shows just drive me nuts. I mean, like we came inside of Livermore. Actually, that was awesome. And the kids were just enjoying it. And they're just having fun. And half the time the people there, I want to like, okay, well, do you read books to your kid at night and let them get the enjoyment of reading? Because she's doing a great job and she's reading to your kid. And do you do that at home? Like, it's just, I don't understand the whole point about they're saying this, sexual material for kids. No, it's not. It's just someone who looks awesome and fabulous reading a book, a kid's book. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, but what you do is great. So how long does it take you to get ready?
Oh, it takes.
I've always wanted to ask that question.
Yeah.
Because you look fabulous and you look awesome.
I look better this morning before the show, but it takes. Oh, sorry, I'm dropping things. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to get ready. It depends on the day. Sometimes you're on autopilot, so it can be faster.
I know. I thought it was longer.
After 8 years of it, it's gotten quicker. It used to take longer, and some days you're like dragging a little bit, so you're like, okay. But I think it's just I'm like a very like obsessive compulsive hyperactive. So like I have everything laid out and like ready to go when I start getting ready. So like once I'm like I finish my makeup, it's like bam, I'm dressed and I'm ready. So about an hour and a half. My partner's a lot faster.
So it helps.
Yeah. Oh, eyelashes are a nightmare. They still get me. They still. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, they're rough. They're really rough. And even me, like there's times where I think I have it down and then I do something and it's like, oh, that was wrong.
Ava, I just wanted to say you gave an excellent answer. You gave a positive answer. You explained how long it took and it's only an hour and a half. You've been practicing. They asked Dolly Parton the same question. How long does it take to get your hair done? I don't know because I'm never there.
Yeah. I know, and you
and I put it on.
and you sang Dolly for us at the story hour.
Yeah, because Dolly
Yeah.
Parton she's awesome.
Oh,
Like
she's
her and Miley
amazing.
Cyrus right now.
I know, it
are
was funny
rocking
when they
it.
were talking about the anti-drag ban in the beginning in Tennessee, and we didn't know the wording of it because they were changing it. And I was like, that means Dolly can't go to Tennessee now because she's in drag.
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
Dolly says she does drag, and when she puts on the wig and all that, she said, I'm
She's
doing
in
drag, really.
Yeah, she's always said she loves when drag queens like impersonate her because she's already doing drag herself. And and that's the thing is, again, going back to drag being for everyone, it's like I do shows, and I did a show up in Tamales. And Tamales is this little tiny town, like 15 minutes past Petaluma. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful town. And you got people who would come out. We would have over 200 people a show. And it was really funny because when we first did it, there was a lot of pushback from the community. And they said, well, they have to get permission from like the town hall. And they said, they said, well, the townsfolk are against it. And I said, the townsfolk? And I was envisioning like pitchforks and torches. It was going to be like the Beauty and the Beast storming the castle scene. And I was like, this is wild. And they're like, are you still going to do the show? And I was like, sure. And, and that's the thing is people, and that's why another thing, not all like performers or event like runners give the venues credit as much as they do. And I always make sure I do that as much as possible because they sometimes get like more heat than we do just as entertainers. They get death threats sometimes, they get messaged, they get harassed, and they still put on the shows. John at Big White House Winery, and Gianni and Dina at Rebel, Robin and everybody at Fenestra Winery, even them letting us, us doing Pride in Livermore. It's so crazy that, they know that the risk is, they still let us do it because they know it's about laughter. It's about joy. It's about teaching, with the story hours too, it's about teaching kids inclusion. And a lot of times, some of those kids don't even know what's going on. They just think we're Disney princesses. Some of them are very young. They're like,
that's exactly the way the kids were looking at you, like a Disney princess. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you've heard about the new TV reality game show, Drag Me to Dinner.
I have some friends in there. Yeah,
Really?
I have a couple of friends doing it. Oh, I'm so bad. I haven't really followed it. I know it's like a little kind of game show they're doing. Yeah.
The queens are trying to make dinner or something.
Yeah.
And messing it up in every way possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do things with these nails. And that's why I didn't wear them for story hour because I was like trying to turn the pages. I was like, those were the Las Positas library books. I was like, I'm not about to tear these up with my nails. But no, I have like a couple friends that are going to be in that. And even we had, and sadly, one of the last projects that Heklina did, sadly, we just recently lost her.
What network is this?
It might be Hulu.
I was bad.
One of those.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
have
one of those
trouble keeping
streaming
track.
networks.
Like it's tough. One of the harder things, and my partner and I were just kind of discussing this too, is when you do, because my partner's been doing drag for 7 months, and so it's like still fairly new. But my partner kind of gets it more because of the amount of shows we do. When you do more and more drag, again, it is that kind of like there is. And I use a lot of like random references. Like I used to watch the TV show Charmed a lot, and they would always talk about how they were witches, and they had to you had to keep a life separate from magic. It's kind of the same thing with drag. There is a degree where, it has to be like you have to take care of yourself outside of drag. You have to remember that there's a person underneath it, and you do have to, do things that you enjoy outside of it. And so I support my friends. My niece was on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I supported her, Lady Camden. I supported her in that. But it was one of those things where it's like I don't like watch as many drag things that do come out because there's so many of them now, and I love it. And I try to every now and again, okay, I'll give time to this one, but I try to watch just other movies and shows that are a little separated from it, so it gives that balance.
Well, I just figure the more shows there are on TV and available to the general public, it's going to get harder and harder to try to ban these events,
Yes, absolutely.
So,
And it helps really, honestly, it's helped so many local performers Like, because again, the visibility for drag, it's given us more opportunities to do shows in different places that we never had before. And that's a really great, and it's great because doing the shows out here and them having Pride out here and us doing like tamales and places where they didn't have a lot of it before, you didn't see it. It's great because you get those people that are like, it brings them so much joy, but they would have had to drive to the city otherwise for it. So they don't get to see it. So it's really just seeing that joy in people. When I think it's one of the most gratifying things for me in drag. And I think one of like the perfect example, we did one of the tamale shows, and there was a woman who came, and I was talking to her before the show, and she said she had driven past it the previous month because it was like this outside space at this place called the William Tell House. And she said that she'd driven past it, and she said it was the most joy she had felt since pre-lockdown, and that she really, really wanted to just go and experience it. And I mentioned that at the show, and she started crying. And my drag daughter, Rosie Petals, was this like really, she's from Ireland, and she's this bearded queen, and she's tall, and she's just like, she's always wearing big poofy things. You just see her vanish, and I turn on, she's gone, and you see her in the distance running to this woman to give her a hug. And she was crying, and she's Irish, so I always do impersonations of her, but she was just like, she's like, oh, I just couldn't handle it. This woman crying for the gays. I was not ready. And it was really, really sweet. And I think that's the best takeaway, but it really does help like with the visibility with those shows happening, which does make it harder for them to do away with us. Yeah.
Anybody have questions?
Oh, yes.
Oh, hi. Is it okay if I ask a question? This is Susanna.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your origin story of starting as a drag queen. I'm a cis straight woman. My question is there a little bit of history behind drag that you could share? Because I think that I'm in need of some education about, how is it that drag started? Was it because there were people who identified as trans and felt that they could, entertain? Or I guess, and then I guess the other question too is, why do you think that there are more drag queens than drag kings? Thank you so much.
Okay, both great questions. So drag's been around. I mean, I don't think we could even possibly pinpoint the exact when drag came about. I mean, some of the earlier like known drag performances, aside from like, we knew they did plays, like they did productions in Greek times and stuff. So we knew that stuff was happening then. But Shakespeare. So the term drag itself came from when they were doing Shakespeare plays. And back then, they would not give women roles in the plays. They wouldn't give them roles. And so they would cast like younger or feminine appearing males to play the female parts. And so the term drag literally came from the dresses dragging across the stage. And that's where the term came from. And from there, it just kind of like, again, it was mostly you had art, and it's kind of that fine line. Even now, there's a lot of people who, start out with drag as sometimes an art form. You have people who are straight who do drag. And again, all sexualities, there's people of all sexualities who do drag, but it's one of the safest ways for a lot of the times in my experience with friends of mine who are trans, it was one of the safest ways for them to start being themselves and expressing themselves that way, because they were able to go out and wear the clothes that they identified with more. But if they said it was just for performance, it was a safer way for them to ease their families into it, and sometimes ease themselves into it. Because some people, they start transition, and some people even retransition. And it's just kind of like that journey of life of kind of finding out who you like, how you identify and who you are. And I have friends who are still figuring it out, you know, and they've gone through various stages of their life. And that's the great part, because sometimes they didn't have a name for a lot of the, like, you know, like what they were experiencing, how they identified. And so, yeah, through like, just kind of, that's more the history of like, of drag itself. And then I think it's just a great way for people to start expressing themselves more. And as far as the question for why are there more queens than kings, it's really unfortunate. I found that like kings are the most professional, fun performers you'll ever meet. But I think where they're cursed is impersonating men is boring. That's why. It's true. Impersonating men, the clothes are boring. It's kind of like, that's why I dress up like this, because I get to wear shiny stuff and sparkly things. And like there's more, like, well, if you go to a store and you go to the women's section, there's more variety. It's very exciting. There's beautiful colors, and the men's section is like, what is this? So I have quite a few. I started off working with kings very early on in my drag career, and I love the kings. There's an incredible king show called the Rebel Kings at White Horse Bar that's been going on for many, many years, and a lot of them are good friends of mine. And again, most organized professional performers you'll ever work with, but they do get overlooked a lot in the community, unfortunately, because people don't always get it. And even when I book kings in my shows, you know, you see the hesitation sometimes with the audience when they don't quite understand, because sometimes they don't know that kings exist. That's the wild part about it. And so I always make sure I work in kings as much as possible shows. And I tell people like, they're amazing. Like, in the level of dedication and focus that they have, I don't have the attention span for. Like, I thought I silenced that. But no, truly, truly amazing in any king show you can see. But yeah, that is the unfortunate part, is the kings I've learned who work the most tend to like lean into the like drag, like the high fashion or like overt form of drag, where they start wearing like the full sequin jackets and like doing different things like that, because then it helps them stand out a bit more. Because a lot of times if you see a king come out and he's wearing like jeans and flannel, people are just kind of like, what's happening? They're like, where's the glitter? And it's really unfortunate. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Thank you. Where can you see me next? I do have a website. I'm really bad about my website, and and it's crazy because I'm paying extra to put the calendar on there so I can put the dates on there. We are fourth Saturdays. I need to get my dates right for this one though, because I think we did let me just make sure. Hold on. I'm going to my phone. I'm being bad. I do a lot of shows. I know we do anywhere between 17 to 26 shows, events, and like in the month, and we added a few because of like we're doing a wedding in next week in Guerneville. So a couple things we got coming up. So out here, we are going to be at Rebel in downtown Livermore on the 17th. So we're going to be there at 11 a.m. It's a brunch show. We had to postpone our original date, so now it's falling on that day, which is the same day as the Juneteenth event at Bankhead. So I'll be running between the two. And then the 24th, we're going to be at Fenestra Winery. We moved our show Dragon Vino from Big White House Winery to there. They're absolutely amazing. They took really good care of us, and we had the best. And Jesse, who actually coordinated that show with us at Big White House, is now helping out with the events at Fenestra as well. So we moved the show over there. And then on the 30th, and this is one we just added, we're going to be doing a show at Tap 25. So you'll be able to, it's a busy one for Pride Month.
I don't want to offend you. You're so busy with your schedule. Do you have a day job?
No, that is my full-time job.
It's your full-time.
Yeah, I used to have a day job. That was a funny story, actually. I worked at Hobby Lobby, and I did. I know, it's always the best. It's the best thing to ever say at shows. Well, it was funny because I didn't know, and I took the job. I was leaving a previous job that was a really, really a toxic work environment, and I was looking at different jobs in the area that would work with my schedule because I knew I was going to be doing drag. So I was like, oh, they're closed on Sundays. Somebody recommended it to me. I was like, they're closed on Sundays. They gave me Saturday and Monday off. So I was like, okay, I have fully availability to do the shows on the weekends because back then I was going to the city more because there weren't as many shows in the East Bay. And I didn't know. And I told some friends and they were like, oh. And my friend Maverick, who I met at Las Positas QSA, Maverick's like, what do you mean you're working there? And I was like, what do you mean? And Maverick's like, look it up. And I looked it up, I was like, oh. And then I told my friends, so our advisors for the QSA at Las Positas College were Dr. John Rise and Dr. Terry-Ann Benjavino. And absolutely, they're still really great friends of mine. I love them dearly. And Terry-Ann is history and women's studies professor. And John was like, we are not telling Terry-Ann about this. And I was like, I have to tell Terry-Ann. I told her, and she's like, so you quit, right? And I was like, not exactly. So I worked there for like 5 years, but I actually worked with some really amazing people who were very supportive. There were other queer people that worked there as well. And they was great. They knew where to put me. They put me in the back in the frame shop. They're like, he's creative and we can put him back there. Yeah. And that was my day job. And then I worked for the VA for a short bit as well. But I decided to commit to drag full time. Yeah. Right. Did you have a? Oh no, that would be a crime to everyone. People wouldn't like me much. I sing Happy Birthday. No, so we do lip sync performances. There are performers that do sing. And even there's actually, that's like a fun point too as well, is that there are even some people who don't necessarily do drag because they wanted to do drag. Sometimes they're like musicians and it would be kind of like a fun thing to kind of play into it and get them more visibility, like a gimmick, but it does work and they enjoy it. Like Adore Delano was on American Idol one season, Danny Noriega, and he started doing drag and he enjoyed it, but it was kind of like a play up to kind of really launch his music, and it did. And he was on RuPaul's Drag Race, and yeah, but I lip sync personally. I lip sync, and most of the time it's just like emceeing, and my emceeing is a bit stand up. Oh my god. I'm popular today. And my emceeing is a bit more of like stand-up comedy. So I a bit of both. So that's kind of lip syncing and stand-up comedy for me. Yeah.
So when you lip sync, do you have a favorite artist?
Oh, I have so many.
Okay.
My all-time favorite artist is the late Aaliyah. I grew up in the 90s and like listened to all of her music, but I do a lot of different Proud Mary, I do Tina Turner, I just recently did, I was gonna go on break and then she passed. I was like, I have to do a Tina number. So last week I did Proud Mary.
Okay, we asked you how long it took you to put on your makeup. How long does it take to get out of it?
Tonight it will be 5 seconds. It'll be, yeah. Yeah. I mean, on a hot day, it comes off faster than you want it to. On a really hot day, you start melting and you're like, oh no. Some performers accidentally, so like we have our setting spray, which is what helps us get through the day, but there are some performers who carry cans of like makeup dissolver, and I have friends who have accidentally thought they were just using setting spray and they sprayed themselves with the makeup dissolver. Oh, no. And then they had to redo their makeup entirely. But yeah, no, like on a day like this, was like already a hot day, and when we do the brunch in Alameda, it's really great. We've like sell out there quite a bit. We were sold out today. We had over 100 people there, and so you're like running around in this, and it's a big space, but it's a lot of body heat, so it gets very hot. And we're running around, and I'm up on the stage under the lights the majority of the time because I'm emceeing in between. So it's like we did the show, and then like it's really hot outside now, so we were like on the freeway and had the AC going. We're like, okay, we're on our way back to Livermore, but then I have a show tonight too, still in El Cerrito, so. Yeah, it's so tonight when I take it off, it's gonna be quick. It's oh, sorry, we got 2 questions. Oh, yeah.
How often do you change your show?
Oh, change the show. Well, most of the shows we kind of do like regularly in different ways. So like the brunch in Alameda we do weekly. I do a show in Rockridge weekly as well, and then some shows are like monthly. And usually they kind of stay the same. They have like different names for them, like Drag Yourself to Brunch or Dragon Vino or Dolled Up and different things like that. And then it's just kind of where they fall on the calendar each month. So sometimes most of them have set dates each month, but sometimes they kind of move things around, and it's like playing Tetris with the calendar. And, yeah.
What's going on in October?
In October, Livermore Pride. Livermore Pride, lots and lots of Livermore Pride. And we're super, super excited. And we're going to be at the Bankhead. So it's amazing location and third weekend. Yep, third weekend. Yeah, it's going to be great. Oh, that's awesome.
So what's the challenge as a business?
I'm saying,
what is your challenge as a business, and what's the most difficult part?
I think the difficult part for me, I mean, there's a lot of different things. Like when you're like hosting and producing shows, there's like the little day-to-day things. It's like booking performers, and you know, it's like it's a job in itself. Like that's the thing. It's like, I think the biggest challenge is making sure you're keeping things fun, because it is an art form. It is, you know, it's an art form, a hobby in its own right. It's entertainment. I do love it as an art form, but it's kind of like that challenge of anything that you love in life. It's keeping it that thing you love and keeping it fun, because when it does become a business in itself, it makes it harder, because then you do have, you know, when you're working with venues, you do have people that you're working with or that you do answer to in one way, shape, or another. And then you have your own employees, you have performers that you're booking and DJs that you're working with that do have to you have to like wrangle and keep on time and make sure they're turning in their music, or that they're with different venues too. That's one of the harder parts. And that is where, you know, like with the Drag Story Hour, where it is that like dangerous line of like, a lot of times, because there were actually, if y'all remember, there were people in the room that were actually protesters physically there while we were there and recording the entire time. And what it was is they were hoping, because there are sometimes, you know, performers who, you know, are more like their whole art is more visual or it's performance based. So they do sometimes wear things that are often more like revealing, and they don't really understand the time and place factor of that. And I do a lot of family friendly shows, so I know how to go to the shows where it's not quite family friendly, and then we do the shows that are family friendly, but you have to know how to like approach each situation and like what to wear, what not to wear. And so as a host and a producer, I have to make sure that the performers adhere to those rules and are in those spaces, because again, it's, you know, if there are kids there, it's like you do still want to have a clean show that's respectful. And you know, that's, I think they were hoping I was going to be in there like naked, dressed as Jesus with the you know, because that's what happens. They use videos that they see from one event, and then they like link it into a video of that. But I was like, well, I mean, we were in a pretty dark room, so they'd have a hard time finding something to like edit into that. I'm really fascinated. I really want to see where the video ends up, because I did look particularly good that day. Because well, there were two guys on the front that were wearing shirts that said world's greatest lesbian, but they clearly weren't there with any children or anything, but they were there like recording the entire time. And, you know, it's one of those weird, it's an uncomfortable feeling, but it is like, you know, you're like, well, I hope you got what you thought you were coming for, because I didn't give it to you. That's for sure. But that's the hardest parts about a business, is keeping it fun, but then having to still be a boss. And, you know, something I'm sure you've all had to experience in various forms for sure. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you run into any of the protesters?
I did not. Well, they had planned very early on, as soon as we knew. So the first incident was we had been tagged in an Instagram post by a podcaster that was complaining about the event and tagged us in it. And we blocked and we moved on with our lives. And then I did get like a very nasty message through my website, and And then we knew that was happening. It was actually someone on Instagram who's an ally sent it to me because they saw it, and they're like, just so you're aware, I saw that this was happening. And I sent it to the people I was coordinating with at the LPC Literary Arts Fest. And so they pretty much we went in a couple weeks before. We met with not quite their security lead, but someone who kind of like really knew the building very well. And she coordinated kind of how we were going to come in and everything. From there, they were just kind of concerned about where I was going to park, because we knew the protesters were planning on parking in one area. And I was like, I'm not going to leave my car at the mercy of people like this. But I know the campus really well because I went there. So I knew where to kind of park. That was close. And and they took really good care of us, but I was like behind several locked doors, so I never even got to really go outside of the actual story hour. There was like a reporter who had sent me an email around the time we started to try to meet with me, but we'd already left at that point. And I've been talking about that quite a bit recently, actually, because of the I do not knock no disrespect to the writer at all. I think she did her job very well. You're supposed to be impartial when you're in journalism. So I think she did her job. What I thought was funny was the title. Largely like tense, but largely peaceful. And that's something I've been talking about at the shows a lot lately, is if you're able to go to something like that and you're able to see people being angry and trying to force their way into the room, because at times they were, there's nothing peaceful about that. When people go with ill intent to something, there's nothing peaceful about that. When you're holding signs that say "Stop the Queer Agenda" and indoctrination, and you're putting words like that out at a group of people that you know nothing about, there's nothing peaceful about that. So I was like, if somebody can write something, and I made the choice because there was a follow-up message about them asking to talk. It was like it was like news. It was a sketchy news place that was trying to reach out to me about it. But it was kind of, if you can write something like that says it's peaceful, then you are in a bubble, and a comfortable bubble, because it doesn't affect you. And I think that's the biggest issue, is that there's so many people who are comfortable because the things that don't affect them. And you can kind of look, and we're all kind of guilty of this in certain ways. You know, we see things on the news and you're like, okay, that's separated from me, until it is your reality in one way, shape, or another. But it really is something that, like, you know, if it's like, oh, well, you know, I'm not a part of the queer community, so I don't have to be concerned with what's going on with them, but I'll, you know, and so it's easy to say it was peaceful, but as we know, it wasn't peaceful.
Well, if she had just gotten to the show, she'd realize it wasn't peaceful because they were trying to harass some of us as we were leaving the show.
Yeah, they were standing right outside the door because we saw them when they were walking us out of the back. And that was the crazy part about it. It was a very stressful day because we didn't really know what it meant. We didn't know what was going to happen, what was going on. You know, that was, even for me, I haven't been in many like situations specifically like that before. Because I've always walked around like feeling like, oh, I'm confident, I'm good, I'm safe. But then in that particular situation, we really didn't know. And my partner too, this is all very new to my partner, because my partner moved from a small town in Vermont and started drag 7 months ago. So like having that level of something going on, my partner didn't feel safe that day. And I told them, I was like, don't get into drag. Like, I got this covered, because, you know, they didn't have to deal with that. That was the thing. But it was, you know, we understood the importance. My partner still went and supported me, and we understood the importance of it. And again, it was for the people that were there for the right reasons, for the kids that enjoyed it. And, you know, I mean, and I've been joking around a lot, because when we were in the green room in the back, which was great because, again, I went to Las Positas College. I got an associate's degree in English literature there. So I actually know a lot of the faculty. So when we were in the back, it was nice because I was able to catch up with a few people. But one of the professors came to the back and was laughing, and it was the most annoyed laugh. Like, they were just so, like, they thought it was funny, but they were so annoyed. And they told me that one of the protesters had said, "What exactly does LPC stand for?" And it's like, the building that you're in. So I've been saying, they're not mad at us. It's literacy they're mad at. We're just the scapegoat. That's the reality. I was like, you probably had to GPS how to get here, so you probably had to know what the name was. But what does LP? I was like, that's not the queer agenda. That's not it. It's the college. Yeah. It's not very common. I mean, I think in different ways. I mean, there's a couple different answers to that. So in the general sense, it's not being full-time and successful versus being full-time. There's a lot of performers that want to be full-time, but at the end of the day, we don't really get paid that much a lot of the times to be able to do it. Like you can get a lot of times it's like working like a service job, like waitressing. You make more in tips than you do often get paid, and it's because generally venues, if the venues themselves are coming out of pocket to pay, oftentimes when they're trying out a drag show, a lot of times it's a new venue trying to get themselves off the ground. So they're trying to find something that'll help them business wise. Or like my show in Rockridge, it was a last ditch effort for them to save their bar. And so they asked me to come in 5 years ago, and we did the show, and more business came in. So they kept the show. But oftentimes, they can't afford to pay us, or in the cases where they can, it just isn't necessarily sustainable for them to pay as much as some performers ask for. So for me, I'm just very kind of business smart for the most part when it comes to drag. So, I work with the venues more so than a lot of performers, because a lot of performers, are very much working for themselves. They're like, oh, they demand like this high amount that the venue themselves can't sustain over time. And then the performers don't really actively work to bring in people or make sure that it's selling tickets or what have you. And I try to make sure I'm working as closely with the venue as possible, and, foster good relationships with the venues and everybody that I'm working with. And, there's a lot of performers that don't go in, they don't bother to learn people's names. And, I go in and I say hello to everybody and I get to know people. And I'm luckily in a position where most of the shows I do, everyone's pretty much like family now, and I know everybody, and we hang out outside of shows and we talk outside of shows. But it is harder to sustain it, like for a lot of people. So for me, it's just kind of like knowing how many shows I have in the month, knowing what my bills are, what I need to take care of. I support my mother and my grandmother as well, so making sure, and I wouldn't put them in a position where I couldn't take care of it. So it's just kind of like making sure you have enough gigs, but the right gigs as well, that you can sustain, rent and bills and everything. Because there are performers that even work a lot more than me, but they don't make a lot of money because they're often working for free or working for tips. And they live in San Francisco, where the pay rate isn't always as good unless it's one of the bigger shows, but you kind of have to like be in the business for quite a while to be welcome to those shows and stuff as well, which is harder. So, and then this time of the year, it's actually great because I tell new performers all the time, June, there's a lot of backlash that corporate businesses get for having corporate drag shows during this month, and people get complaining because they're like, oh, well, you don't support us the rest of the month. I'm like, but by all means, go and take their money this month, because this is the month you're gonna get. I mean, honestly, because a lot of times they're trying to show whether they are inclusive or not. They're trying to show that they are or prove that they are. So a lot of times, no, really, I had a friend of mine who was he's a performer, who was like, I don't have many shows this month. I'm concerned. I don't really know if I can afford it, because they are kind of living as a full-time drag performer right now. And they're like, I don't really know if I'm going to be able to sustain it. I said, don't worry. I said, you're fine. I said, because all the last minute businesses who haven't scooped up all the drag performers out here already are going to start reaching out to every single person they can find. And they're going to be desperate so you can get more money out of them this time of the year. And I was like, so go for it. And she called me literally yesterday, and she's just like, you were so right. I've already got three new messages and a couple of new gigs. And I'm like, yeah, this time of the year. But I'm like, an old friend of mine said something really important. And this is a drag performer who had doing drag over 30 years. And was doing drag in San Francisco at a time where they had to wear signs that stated that they were female impersonators, whether they actually were or not, whether they were trans or what have you. had to wear signs that stated that they were female impersonators. And she'd worked at Finocchio's in San Francisco. And she, said this once because somebody was complaining about, the surge in, pride, merchandise at stores. And she said to them, she said, don't ever complain about that, because regardless of if it's 1 month, it means the world to people who never got to see that happen at all. And for her growing up, and even doing drag for all those 30 years, she's like, I love walking in, even if it's for that month, and seeing rainbows sitting at the front of Target. And I love it because it pisses off angry. I don't know if anybody else saw that video. That video was hilarious. I don't know. There's a video of a man who went into a Target and like threw a fit over the Pride merchandise. And I just know I loved the woman who worked there that responded to him, because he's like, you support this satanic gay indoctrination. And she was like on her phone and she could not be bothered. And she was just like, she's like, yep, Satan, gay, all of it. Yep. And she's like, you got to leave the store. She reminded me of Lexus from Schitt's Creek. Like, she just could not be bothered with him at all. And I was like, I hope they gave her a raise. I really do. But it does mean the world, because even for me, we moved from Oakland when I was very, very little. And I've lived most of my life between Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore. And, I say it all the time, even doing the shows, when I was doing the show in Dublin and doing the show in Pleasanton, we did a show at World of Beer. And I went to Regal Cinemas when they first opened. My sister took me to see Coyote Ugly, and she found out I was gay. And but just knowing that there's someone who was like younger who can go to the shows and experience drag and feel themselves seen in the community, because for a lot of us who grew up in families where we don't have like other gay relatives, or we're not exposed to other gay people, you grow up in homes where, and this is like, something my parents, I feel bad because my mom apologizes a lot for this now, but like, you have these experiences where, when they talk about indoctrination and all this crazy stuff, again, I wasn't exposed to anything gay when I was a kid. I knew I was gay, but I was not exposed to anything gay. But every now and again, you would watch a movie, and oftentimes the characters who were doing drag were straight characters. They were not gay characters. But you would watch a movie, and every now and again, there may have been a gay moment, a kiss, or a hand touch, and you would see your parents or relatives respond in a negative manner, and you knew you could not express yourself, because you knew, and you had to learn at a young age to even pretend to be bothered by those things, which is like one of the saddest things. And so for me, when I see younger kids coming out at an earlier age and their families supporting them, I think that's the most beautiful thing ever. And just finding themselves, or being allowed to find themselves and allowed to be themselves. And, and I think there was a book I read at Las Positas College when I was a student there, and it's not quite, it's called The Geography of Bliss by Eric Weiner. And there was a quote in there that I really, really loved. And in the book itself, he's basically going to I think it was 5 of the saddest places in the world and 5 of the happiest places in the world, to try to determine what it is that made those places happier or sadder. And one of the quotes in the book, and I've always remembered this one, is, when you go somewhere new, you give yourself the permission to be who you always wanted to be. And I think, for drag, gender expression, being able to go to a Pride for the very first time and see people like you and feel connected and feel seen, you are allowed to be yourself more than you ever were before. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why I appreciate people like yourselves who support it, and people like Brittni and the whole team of Livermore Pride, who literally made history by starting Pride in Livermore, California. And sorry. Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Ava.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful having you here. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Oh, right. We have the rodeo parade coming up. That's next Saturday. Oh my God, already. And then, of course, Juneteenth. We'll have a table at Juneteenth, so we hope to see you all there. Also, if you haven't visited us before, we have a sign up in the back of the room. You might find something interesting that you'd like to work on with us. So we'd love to have you. All right, thank